something going now. Crowd loving it. It's a ball, fly ball. Home run! 3, 2, 1.
All right, Ryan, just going over a couple of quick hot topics, as I like to say, some hot topics. We haven't done this in a while. Jeter's ankle broke. Is that it for the Yankees?
Yeah, I think they're done. They just don't. I mean, I'm amazed at I need to watch a lot of those games this weekend, but hearing the stadium was half empty and the way the team played, they weren't in it. I think they're done.
Well, it's interesting, I think, in my opinion, is watching those games is that the pitching is there. They're keeping it close, right? It was 1-0 going to the 8th last night, but they're just not hitting. They don't have the confidence in hitting, and that lineup is stacked. You would think that lineup could at least get a couple of runs. Now, heading back into Detroit, they're going to place Verlander. I mean, the thing is, with the Yankees, you never can count them out. Like, it's hard to say they're going to be down and out when they're,
They're the one team. They're the one team you can never 100% say down and out until they're actually officially eliminated.
Because you also remember, okay, Verlander's going to pitch, yes, but Sabathia's got to pitch still, right? So there is some light at the end of the tunnel, you might say, if you're a Yankee fan. Neither you or I are Yankee fans, so it doesn't matter. But it'd be nice to have a nice series instead of a 4-game sweep.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you're a couple of Detroit fans, especially the ones we know, I'm sure they would love just to have a sweep and be over.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised I haven't had at least a tweet or an email from the one, Dave Laughlin, who is a huge Tigers fan, and he's usually pretty ramped up when they're beating the Yankees, so
we'll see.
We'll see. Dave, if you listen to these, which I doubt you do, you jerk, then, good luck.
And then the other NLDS, we have the Giants and the Reds.
That's the NLCS.
NLCS. NLDS is the division series. It's the championship series. NLCS, we have the Cardinals taking game 1 in San Francisco. Now, it's interesting. San Francisco hasn't won at home yet on their playoff run so far.
Yeah,
but they've moved on.
They seem to get it done. And the Cardinals, what scares me with the Cardinals right now, in that sense, from a Giants fan, is that the Cardinals seem to be clicking a little bit on all cylinders. Like, everything seems to be coming together. They seem to be that prototypical playoff team where, offense, defense, and pitching comes around just in time.
But now, saying that, the Giants have a great pitching staff. Not the saying that the Cardinals don't. I mean, Baumgartner sort of had a bad inning, and that sort of ended their chances yesterday. I mean, Giants came back and made it close, but in the end, it was just too big of a hole to come back from. But I think the Giants have the pitching staff to make this a series.
I hope so. Imagine having both series go, 4 or 5 games. That would just be
4 or 5 games.
That would be done. Especially if the Yankees get swept and the Cardinals take, if the Giants take 1 game, and
that would be awful.
That would be horrible. Because baseball, to me, I think has had a pretty good season.
Yeah.
Overall, I mean, I'm a Jays fan, so it's been a horrendous year for the Jays. But yeah, everything else, I think baseball's had a pretty good year.
And then heading over the NFL, the Ravens seem to have a couple of injuries, major injuries. What do you think about what's going on there?
Well, and that was a lot of the talk coming into the season about the 2 dominant defenses over the last decade, or 2 of the most dominant, Steelers and Ravens, and they're both old. And I think the Ravens are showing their age a bit with some real bad injuries. I mean, Terrell Suggs is coming back, but we don't know if Ray Lewis is done for the career or just for the season.
And then,
it'll be interesting.
And then what do we got in terms of, is there any other team that's like surprising you in the NFL right now, or is it just status quo?
It's a bit of everything. I mean, the Cardinals were supposed to be decent. They were supposed to be maybe better than average, and they're quite good. The Texans, I don't think anyone expected them to go as long as they did undefeated. They just lost this past weekend, but and that was to the Packers. No one expected the Packers to be as low as they are. So there's been a few surprises with some teams, but I think in the end, this is sort of what you expect in the NFL. This is parity in the first 5 weeks all the time in the NFL, which is good.
And in the NHL, seems like tomorrow or Tuesday, if you're listening to us on Tuesday, which you probably will be, they're going to be back to the bargaining table. What do you see? Is there any movement tomorrow, or is it sort of status quo?
It sounds like this is just trying to get back to the table on the core issues, that they're trying to get the core issues going again. And there's reports today that the NHLPA is in the midst of compiling or composing some radical new proposal to get talks going, and I have no idea what that may entail. And we'll see, I guess. I don't know what to make of this, other than both sides are dragging their feet on the core issues.
And then Taylor Hall has been assigned to Oklahoma, wouldn't you like to be Oklahoma AHL season ticket holder at this point?
Absolutely. I mean, imagine what that. I mean, apparently the turnstiles, saw an article today for the AHL, which opened this past weekend, were really good this weekend with the lack of NHL. Imagine a guy like Taylor Hall making the tour. It's almost like some veteran player doing his retirement farewell tour, where this guy's going to show up in all these AHL towns and people are going to be able to see him play.
Well, I think you're forgetting who else is on that team.
There's a lot on that team. That's going to be a great
Eberle,
team.
Nugent-Hopkins, and Schultz, who's the guy they signed in the offseason. The Oilers pretty much have their number one power play unit in the AHL.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at what happened last year in the AHL with the Marlies running to the Calder Cup in a good run and lost in the Calder Cup final to an outstanding team. I think this year you can't tell me that Oklahoma City isn't an out-and-out favorite this year to be maybe the number one team in the AHL.
And this past week also in the NBA, we had the Raptors play Detroit a couple times. And the second one, Valanciunas, the new Raptors center, played more minutes than normal and came up with a big game, 13 and 8 and 2 blocks. I know you probably didn't get a chance to watch it, but looking at those stats, what do you think about prospects of the Raptors this year?
Well, again, I think he is the key to the team this year. I mean, Bargnani's Bargnani. I mean, without Bargnani in the lineup, they have trouble, right? But I think Valanciunas is going to be a real key to this team this year. And I think, as you've said, I mean, you're the NBA guy. You know better than I do. I think they're an exciting team. I mean, I'm buying the hype, although, seeing is believing. What do you think? I mean, obviously you liked his game.
I think his game is good. I think getting Lowry back to play Wednesday night is going to be a key just to see how they all mesh together. Calderon being hurt is funny because one point guard gets healthy, the next one goes down. I mean, I guess that's the benefit of having two point guards that can start for you. That's pretty good. Valanciunas being there and how he performed with Bargnani actually on the defensive end actually looked really good. I mean, I think that was the surprising thing to me is that the chemistry defensively, at least for one game, was brilliant between Bargnani and Valanciunas, and I think if that continues, that only bodes well for the Raptors going forward.
Now, they played 3 games last week, if you include the Real Madrid game.
Yep.
They had a home-and-home with Detroit. They split that series. You watched, I'm assuming, a fair bit of those games.
Yep.
What do you think, even though they are the first 3 preseason games of a new year, this team has promised, based on some of the chatter out there, to be just a more exciting brand of basketball than what we've been used to the last couple of years. Do you see any hints of that? Is it obvious already, or is it going to be there? Is it going to work out that way? I mean, obviously you don't know for sure until it happens.
No, I think it will get there, but I think this week will be a big tell sign for that. With Lowry coming back in from the injury, you're going to get the point guard you've been looking for coming back into the lineup that needs that prototypical shooting/passing guard, where Calderon's more of a passer than a shooter. So I think getting Lowry back in the lineup, or into the lineup for the first time, will provide that analysis that I can give you more on how the Raptors look.
Being an NBA fan, first and foremost, do you find that this hockey lockout has brought more attention to the NBA, especially up here in Toronto? I'm assuming it has. Do you think it's a good thing as an NBA fan? I mean, putting your NHL fandom aside.
I don't like lockouts to begin with. Lockout strikes, I don't like any of that when it comes to Major League sports. Now, when it comes to like Joe Blow, who's a car worker or whatever, who's on the line,
plant guy,
plant guy, I'm all for it. If you're trying to get a better deal from a major company, go ahead. But these guys make a ton of money on both sides. Owners make a lot of money, players make a lot of money. The exposure that the Raptors will get because of the NHL lockout in Toronto especially will be huge. I think right across the board, and actually in Canada it will be big, because you got to remember it's not only Toronto that is being locked out. You're having major centers like Calgary, Vancouver, Montreal, which are big cities in Canada, will be looking for a sort of Canadian relevant story. And Toronto Raptors are the only Canadian major sport team that's on the go coming up. So I think that's a big push for any basketball fan or any sports fan really in Canada.
See, what I think too, and I agree with you obviously, I mean from what I know of the NBA and what I know of the Canadian sports scene, I think right now this team is in the best position in a lot of years to take a big chunk of the Leafs market, if you will. I don't think this lockout is looking well to begin with for the owners. I think it's looking worse and worse as it drags on for the players as well. And I think the NBA, being a young, especially the Raptors being a young team like this that looks like they could be exciting, and we've got some personalities in this team for the first time in a few years. I think, like you said, across Canada, but particularly in Toronto, the NBA and the Raptors could take a real chunk out of the Leafs pie. Now, if they actually do well this year,
I think that's the key. I think that's really the key. I think the Raptors need to come out of the gate. Now, it's going to be hard because their schedule doesn't really complement them to come out of the gate really fast. But if they can come out of the gate and they come out of the gate well and fast and hard and have a good record, I think you're absolutely right. They have a good chance to get some type of sustainability in terms of the market. I think Toronto or Canada is always going to be a hockey country, for at least for the next 10 years, but needs to say, I think if you can get guys or girls who are normally hockey fans who can watch a couple of games and get into the basketball when there's nothing else to watch, I think that can turn them into at least being occasional fans or being fans of that particular team. So on nights that maybe when their hockey team isn't playing, when they return, they will tune in to see how the Raptors were doing, because they will be intrigued by what they saw earlier on in the season.
Right, and we both, one of our biggest complaints over the last several years with the nightly sports shows across the board up here is that you can have a full night in the NBA on the sked, and you'll see Raptors highlights for 30 seconds to a minute, and you'll touch on a couple of the bigger games or big teams across the NBA. And all in all, the entire pack they put together for the NBA will be a minute, maybe two, maybe three.
Yeah. And
the rest of the show, be it 30 minutes, 60 minutes, is geared towards hockey, where they rehash the same stories 3 times in that hour show.
And in our market, that drives ratings. I understand that. But in the end, because of the NHL lockout, this will actually drive a lot of stories of the Raptors, because you're going to have guys who are going to be talking about the Raptors, who are following the team, having sort of spotlights on the players, interaction with the players, and I think that's key. And I think this team has a lot of interactions. Like if you go on Twitter, if you look at the personalities on the team, I think you're getting a team that can grab sort of the attention of the sports fan in Toronto.
Now you touched on Twitter there, and it made me think there was a tweet today from Dwayne De Rosario about getting behind Canadian soccer.
Yep.
Now you are a guy who definitely follows international Canadian basketball quite a bit. We've talked at length about Steve Nash and his affiliation now with as GM of Team Canada. The men's Canadian soccer team is a point away from going on to the next round, the next final group for the World Cup, which we haven't been in since '86. It was the first and only time we've ever been there. Christine Sinclair was suspended 4 games for her actions, or what she said about the brutal reffing in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Soccer internationally seems to be continuing to grow after that women's soccer debacle with the Olympics, or triumph, if you want to call it a triumph. I think it was in the end. A bronze medal is always good. So again, I guess what I'm getting at is you have Dwayne De Rosario out there tweeting all the time. I see Hayley Wickenheiser tweeting all the time, another great Canadian international player, but hockey, of course. I think with the NHL being out on lockout, some of our international sports, some of these sports that we look at, I think are going to get a lot of attention, and I think it's great in this sense that Team Canada they seem to be building behind Team Canada, whether it's women's hockey, men's hockey, which is already there, we know, soccer, basketball. I mean, this is fantastic in that sense. It's too bad it's coming at the expense of the NHL and all the money. I think this is a good thing in the long run for people in Canada to sort of wake up and see that there is other sports to watch other than the NHL.
Absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost, I think if you guys get a chance to watch Team Canada play Honduras coming up to try and move forward on the CONCACAF playoffs for the chance to play in the World Cup, get a chance to get behind that team. I mean, wouldn't that be fabulous if Canada can get in the World Cup? That would be wonderful for our country. I think it would be wonderful to have another very popular sport in the world, in Canada especially now. Soccer is overtaking hockey in terms of participation in young people. I think there's a great interest in cheering on any sort of Team Canada team, especially if they do well. So I'm not being necessarily a soccer fan myself. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm not interested in that and hoping that they do well. And absolutely, if there's nothing of my core sports that I follow on, I absolutely would tune in and make sure I follow that game and cheer for our hometown guys.
Well, the MLS is loving the support the Canadian men's team and women's team gets, because it only helps breed more soccer support for TFC, the Whitecaps, and the Impact. The Raptors getting a big push. Some of the Canadian kids that are coming up in the NBA and in the college ranks, the Raptors are loving that because it's giving them support. Team Canada's loving that. And to me, this is the biggest bumper crop of young kids coming up into the NBA through the college ranks that I can remember. Now, I'm not a big basketball guy, but you don't see a lot of Canadian players in the NBA. But you've been following these kids
I have been, and a shout out to Xavier Rathen Mays, I guess would be his name. I haven't met Xavier, so I guess I don't know necessarily how to pronounce his name, but Scarborough native and committed to FSU, playing the ACC. It's a tough place to play. You got Duke, North Carolina in there, but congratulations to him. He's 24th ranked senior in the ESPN 100. So that's
he's a guard. He's a guard.
Yeah, he played with Wiggins and all those guys this summer on the CIA Bounce team, and he was probably the third option on that team. But when you're talking about Wiggins, who's the number 1 player in his age group, and you're talking about Lyles, who I think was number 7 in terms of his age group, that's not bad to be the third option on a team like that, especially when your point guards are also highly rated. I think what I'd like to touch on, if I can turn it into something else, big season I think ahead for Tristan Thompson coming in of Texas, and he was the 4th overall pick a couple years ago. Going to play for Cleveland. We got a couple other Canadians who are making some hay. We got Robert Scarce, who came out of Gonzaga, and he's going to play with the Lakers, it looks like. Obviously Nash is on that team.
Tough lineup to crack there, the Lakers.
But I mean, as a backup center, I mean that's.
So he's slotted number 2.
Yeah, number 2.
Cool.
So that's behind Howard, and when you consider that Howard's injured right now,
and he gets injured a lot.
So I think that's a great place for him to play. Especially Nash is probably, you would think has sort of the ear of the GM. You would think, if given the option, he's going to say, "Hey, keep this guy on the team."
Nice to have the GM of an international team as on your team, on your team, on your bench as a scout almost, right?
Right. So I think that's a real sort of coup for him. But I mean, you have Corey Joseph in San Antonio. You got a lot of Canadian kids coming up. Slips my name right now, but the guy from Orlando, Andrew Nicholson, is going to play his first year too. Pretty exciting in the guys who are coming in the NBA this year from Canada. You're starting to see that more and more. And I think if people who are NBA or NHL fans, and maybe the Raptors aren't on, maybe should keep an eye on the Canadian kids that are going to be performing well in the NBA. If the NBA is the only thing that's on at night, and let's say you have a Cleveland game on, maybe tune in and check out Tristan Thompson. He's a Canadian kid from Brampton. Why not, right?
Yeah.
Or check out San Antonio when they play. They have Joseph. Or check out the Lakers. They got Nash and they got Robert Scarce. There's more Canadians playing in the league, and I think if we can see them play and get an idea of who they are and make them more of a name, once the Olympics come around and Canada basketball is playing, the Joe Blow who maybe would not have known who they were will all of a sudden be like, hey, yeah, I know that guy, he plays for the Lakers, or oh, hey, I know that guy plays for the Spurs, or that guy plays for the Magic.
Well, yeah, I think this, in a way, to me, I don't follow a lot of those other teams. To me, I tend to follow some of the bigger teams out there. I wouldn't follow a Cleveland without a LeBron James playing for them, but knowing that Tristan is playing with them, it's definitely something I might do when I know there's a Cavs game on, where I might turn over just to see how he's doing.
Well, exactly, right?
Score,
you may not necessarily watch the whole game, but it'll at least pique your interest a bit to watch it. And that sort of gets to your point with the Toronto, or like when it comes to Team Canada soccer, it's the same idea. Well, maybe soccer is not your sport, but if there's nothing else on, like the hockey is what maybe your main interest is, why not take a night that you would have normally spent and watch a hockey game and cheer on country of your heritage who's playing for the right to get to the World Cup? I mean, why not get a chance to watch Team Canada play Honduras like that? That's what I would do, right? So,
and again, this comes down to this Team Canada, obviously with the World Cup coming around the corner. It's going to be this team for the most part are going to be playing in the World Cup. So why not get to know some of these players early on before the World Cup rolls along? I mean, I think it's a great thing. And then to see some of the young kids, they're going to be mentioning some of the younger kids that are coming up to the Canadian system. Who knows? Those kids could be on the draft block in the MLS draft to play for one of the Canadian teams very soon. I think it's fantastic. I think more people need to get behind the Canadian scene much more so in these sports than in the Canadian one, the hockey one, because we know hockey, we know the juniors, they come up every year. We know the kids playing in the OHL, the WHL, the Q, and the AHL.
Now saying that, so I'm going to jump in here real quick. We got some really big name players right now in terms of young, up and coming guys playing in our markets. In terms of if you really want to get your hockey fix, you got Connor McDavid's playing for the Erie Otters. That guy is a young 15-year-old kid. Crosby came out today saying that's the kid he'd be looking to go watch. You got Nathan McKinnon, who's playing in Halifax Rimouski. I think he's playing Halifax Mooseheads. I think that's
Yeah.
But he came from the same city as Crosby, and he is just lighting it up too, looking to be the number 1 pick overall. And then if you're in the Western League, you got Seth Jones playing for Portland Winterhawks, and Seth Jones is, with a basketball connection, Popeye Joe's son.
Oh, that's right. That's his
Jones'
kid,
son, and he's an American defenseman, but he's also looking to go number 1 overall against Nathan MacKinnon. So in each one of the leagues, OHL, WHL, or the Q, get a chance to go out and watch these kids. It doesn't take any effort, I guess, not time, but effort to go get a chance to watch these kids play when they're this young. I mean, every single market in Canada will have an opportunity to see one of these standout guys. Like I said, Connor McDavid is playing in Ontario, Erie. You got Nathan MacKinnon playing in the Q, Halifax, and you got Portland has Seth Jones. That's each one of the major junior markets leagues has one of these major players.
And that's the thing. Like, I mean, these kids, they're playing on some decent hockey. Granted, it's not the NHL, it's not the Leafs.
Now, going back, we're jumping all over the place because this is a podcast for the ages. This is a wonderful. We're not even being funny. We're just talking to sports, and that's nothing wrong with that. I'm just going to quickly go over, and Ryan can go with me here. The guys, Canadian guys, if you're going to watch the NBA and the Raptors aren't on, these are Canadian players who will be playing in the NBA this year, and what teams they play on. So Ryan can start. We're going to start right off the top, and we'll go through each one of these players.
Miami Heat, that's a team that's going to be on TV a ton this year, has Joel Anthony at center.
All right, so then we got Samuel Dalembert for the Milwaukee Bucks. They may not be on TV a lot, but Dalembert should be a center for the Bucks after Bogut was traded to Golden State.
San Antonio Spurs, they're one of the big teams in the NBA the last decade and a half. We've got Corey Joseph playing point guard there.
He'll be behind. He'll probably be behind Tony Parker there, but he'll get some minutes. He was the first overall pick last year, 29th overall. The 51th overall pick, we got Chris Joseph. Who knows if he'll actually make the team or not, but if he does make the team, it would be playing on the Boston Celtics. Chris definitely has some game and is definitely a consideration, in my opinion, to play, but we'll see if that turns out. If he does get a chance to play, he will be playing for the Boston Celtics.
And then for the Toronto Raptors, we've got Jamal McGlure at center. He's getting up there. He's no spring chicken anymore. We don't know how much time he's going to play. Probably behind Valanciunas, obviously.
Well, I'm not even sure he's guaranteed a spot, to be honest.
Exactly. Yeah,
so
he may not.
He may not even be on the Raptors. But at this point, if he is playing, Jamal McGlure will be playing on the Toronto Raptors. We got Steve Nash, obviously a big signing or trade for the LA Lakers. He will be playing on the biggest market for the biggest team this season in the LA market.
And then with the Orlando Magic, without Dwight Howard there, the Orlando Magic are going to be a little lost, I think, at least as far as star power goes. But you've got Andrew Nicholson playing forward there. Yeah,
Nicholson looks like he's going to be good coming out of St. Bonaventure. Definitely raw talent, but definitely a talent to watch. You got Robert Scarce, who I was talking about before, was the last pick in the NBA draft this year. But for a team that has a thin bench and a guy that probably needs a center, he's a 7-foot guy, played from Gonzaga last year, and national team, I got to assume that Robert Scarce is going to be playing for the LA Lakers this season.
And with the Cavaliers, we already talked about him, Tristan Thompson, forward. He is a kid that is going to make some inroads, I would think, this year.
Yeah, in the preseason year that he's already played already, he's been about 15 points, 10 rebounds, 8 rebounds around there per game. So that's a pretty good stat line just going into your sophomore season. So anyways, guys, there's a rundown of each one of the players that could be playing in the NBA this year. Obviously, you got Matt Bonner as well playing for the Spurs, who's not necessarily quote-unquote a Canadian, but looking to get a citizenship.
Yeah, he tried last year, right, for the FIBA championship there, and ran into some trouble with that. But he wants to be Canadian pretty badly, that guy, which is pretty cool. If you remember the Red Rocket from the Raptors days, those of you who are not too familiar with the rest of the NBA. But I think it's impressive. I think these are a bunch of good kids, and it's going to grow this system. It really is. And I think it's great for everything else. I mean, you look at some of these, obviously the women's soccer team has done great for soccer. Men's soccer program doing well. Steve Nash with Team Canada in basketball can only help, I think. And it'll take some focus away from, not that it needs to be, but from Hockey Canada, which they do well. That's what we follow the most. But it'd be nice to see some of the support be bridged out for some of these other teams.
So as we progress here, guys, on the website and on the podcast, we definitely will be hitting on all these guys, especially if the NHL lockout continues. We'll be looking at the Raptors. We'll be looking at the guys who are playing in the NBA who are Canadian, seeing how they're doing week to week, and we can sort of update that as we go along. We can also talk about the junior hockey ranks. We can look at the 3 guys we just talked about and talk about how they're doing and seeing if there's any prospects that have already been drafted and having standout seasons. Like I know, for instance, Boone Jenner, who is a Canadian World Junior player last year, is having a great season for the Ottawa Generals, and that's close to where Ryan and I live, so we'd be stupid not to go check him out at some point.
Yeah, the Jennies have, they haven't done much in a lot of years. Really, the last big Generals team that I remember was the Lindros years. So, I mean, they're due to have a good run in Oshawa, Motor City.
And with the MLB playoffs going on, you're not going to hear much about it, but once the playoffs are over, you're going to hear coming up is the World Baseball Classic. Happened a couple years ago. We had a game in Toronto. The roster should be coming out soon. Once that roster is getting close to being picked, we're going to go over the team, and we're going to see who did not make the team or who decided not to play. The World Baseball Classic starts up in March. So like I said, if the NHL lockouts continue or cancel the season, there's plenty of stuff to talk about.
Well, exactly. I mean, we've got tons, and we like to touch on the Canadian international stuff. I mean, the golf season's over. There's some great young Canadian golfers coming up on the scene as well that come next golf season, we'll probably have to touch on them as well, because a few of them may be running away with some of the minor tours in golf. But it all looks good. I think right now internationally, Canadians are doing quite well.
So, guys, if you haven't been to our website, or this is the first time you listen to the podcast, Ryan and I pretty much talk about a lot of different sports ourselves. We got Ben Pinder. He normally looks after some baseball, normally Toronto, and he looks after a little bit of hockey. He's a big fantasy guy. We got 2 guys that are writing about soccer. Paul Forrest, he does EPL, does a really good job on that. You really need to read his stuff. It's really funny, really informative stuff. And we got Rami Michael looking sort of at MLS. He's looking at Team Canada's sort of soccer type programs.
Exactly, and Rami has he's a TFC season ticket holder. So generally, after if you can follow, you can get his Twitter account. He's usually at the games tweeting.
Yeah, he's one sec soccer, I think, is his Twitter handle. So you can check him out too.
Yeah, and he's been following the Raptors since their inception, or the Raptors. TFC since their inception, so he tends to give us as much as he can at each game when he's down there. And he's got a life too, so he doesn't get to every home game, but he tries to get to everyone and does some tweeting this and writing up on the TFC. So keep following. Go to the site, check out some of the writers. And
it's got to end because I got to do a fantasy basketball league for OneSecondLeft.com.
Which
got to do that right now. You didn't do, but you know what? Probably not a bad thing because I'd probably dominate you anyways.
Well, yeah, I basically know one NBA player.
Well, we just talked about 8, but
Magic
maybe.
Johnson.
Okay. You see where this is going. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Very long, very uninformative, but at the same point, very
all over the place.
All over the place. Stay with us. We'll have more podcasts later on in the week.
That kid on Smarties.
Once some more sort of games have finished or some things happen. Raptors play this week. The NHL lockout talks this week.
Canada, Honduras.
We're going to have a lot more this week. Later on in the week, we just sort of wanted to talk about sort of some things that we're juggling. We also got an idea of, and definitely want to hear from anybody if you're out there listening, looking at who the top Toronto athlete will be in 5 years. Donnelly here is gonna hit on the Leafs. If you have a guy you think is gonna be the top guy in 5 years for the Leafs, hit him up on Twitter or on his email. Go to the website, you can get both of that information. Hit me up if you have a Raptor you think is going to be the guy. I'm thinking it's going to be Valanciunas, but maybe Lowry or DeRozan or Bargnani. If you like one of those guys, hit me up. And Ben's going to touch on the Blue Jays. So if you have a guy in mind, hit him up. Tell him why that guy should be the guy in 5 years. That story's going to come out in the next week or so. And we're looking, to expand on that a bit. We're looking at the face of these franchises. We want to sort of get a pulse as to who people think are the guy that's going to lead these franchises in the next 5 years. Now, Jays, as we're talking about, Bautista is the guy right now. Probably. Right, but we're talking 5 years down the line. We want to know youth. And we also want to look at 5 years down the line, we want to make sure these guys are the faces of the teams that are in the playoffs, not faces of guys like they are now outside looking in. Yeah, should be fun. All right, hit us up, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll be back at you later on in the week.